Hi everyone, welcome back to Hang Out at Dome with Her World. La la. So, on today's Hangout, we do have a slightly serious, but I hope that it's more informative because I have really a panel of amazing women who is going to be able to share with us a lot more information. Sorry, we kind of have a technical issue. It will be sorted, but we will go on. I just want to introduce everyone. On my far right is Dr. Sally, and she is the General Manager from Ideas Academy. We'll go on to explain a bit more about what Ideas Academy stands for. And then I also have a familiar face, I guess, going soon to be maybe permanent structure for me, Racheal Kwacz, who is our Child and Family Development Specialist. And right here is Dr. No, not Dr. Sally. This is Maja. Sorry. I will get that. Maja, who is the Deputy Representative for the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Let me get it. UNHCR. I've been pronouncing it wrong, actually.
Very well done. You're good on it now.
So now I've got it. Thank you so much. Good morning. It's a slightly new topic for me. I don't usually speak about this, but there is a lot of awareness now about the refugees in Malaysia. I do feel that it's important for us to highlight the issue. And there's so much for me to learn. So learning is something I love doing, so I hope I will learn a lot today. So maybe we just go around. Maybe Dr. Sally, you want to introduce yourself a little bit so that our viewers will be able to understand a bit about Ideas Academy as well?
Sure. Thanks for having us on the show. It's really exciting to be here. I've been very, very fortunate to be with Ideas Academy, first as a volunteer and then I've come on as the interim general manager. And the name Academy might be a little bit deceiving, but we are a school, we're a high school, and our primary reason for existence is to support refugees here in KL. So we were founded by a group of 3 friends who'd been doing some volunteer work with primary school age children, and they realised that there wasn't a clear path. Once they finished primary school, there weren't a lot of opportunities for them to go to high school. So they were very fortunate to hold an event, raise some money, connect with Dutch organisations that then supported them, and they were able to found Ideas Academy, which is now in its 5th year of operation. And we are a high school, so we have students from 12 up to 18 years. Our students do a full academic program, so if you walk into our school, it's like going into any high school. They do a full range of subjects. They have extracurricular activities, they do school performances, we have parent-teacher nights, school reports, you know, the normal teenage issues as well. So we just happen to have, our students happen to have these incredible backstories of going through hardship to get to Malaysia. But I think if you met our students, you wouldn't know that. You meet them and you think these are such engaging, innovative, resilient, mature teenagers that are absolutely passionate about learning, and that's exciting to work with in any educational situation.
Amazing, so good. That there's actually a platform, or not even a platform, a school, I guess, for children, no matter what race or country you're from, that you can still, that's why the topic was, how education should have no boundaries, because as it is, so if you all don't know out there, refugee children in Malaysia don't have access to public schools. Therefore, Ideas Academy is one outlet where kids can get their education. I just want to ask Maja, the first question. I'm going to go to my questions. Sorry. As we all know, education is a basic need for children around the world. How does the lack of education at a young age affect children? What have you seen being in UNHCR?
So that's a complex question in a sense, because you start from the reality of what refugee children have left. in terms of their country of origin. Refugees, first of all, never really leave voluntarily, right? A refugee, in the definition of a refugee lies the fact that they've been forced out of their country, either because there's been a war or because they've been persecuted for very specific reasons. Sometimes it's a political affiliation, it's their ethnicity, it can be very many different things, right? And there's a trauma connected with that flight, right? You have either been exposed to violence, or you witnessed violence, or you've had to sort of be uprooted in a hurry without being able to understand anything around you. And then you land in a foreign country where you don't speak the language, you don't understand what's going on with you. Your family is experiencing hardship. So education, to sort of bring it to that point, becomes a gravitation point, right? It becomes a point where you can seek comfort and friendship and learn and start gaining some of your dignity back and your self-confidence back together with peers in the classroom. It's actually an incredibly central protection mechanism for children, for refugee children in particular. Whether they are 2, 3, 5 years or whether they are 11, 12 years, doesn't really matter. The fact is that they need to experience that daily routine, that learning, and those peers around them. So it's really a big safety measure. And that's why, if you think about it, in international law and in the frameworks that we operate with in terms of development, like the Sustainable Development Goals, the development plans around the world, we have made education a central right. It's in the Universal Declaration for Human Rights, it's in the Child Rights Convention, it's in the 51 Convention relating to the status of refugees. It's SDG, so the Sustainable Development Goal 4 talks about education, leaving no one behind, placing refugees right in there. So it's a very central piece of protection for children, and that's why it's so extremely important to afford them the ability to go to attend education and to receive certified and accredited education, something that they can use when they grow up and can, you know, so that they can
and build that identity for themselves, actually.
And be self-reliant and be able to, you know, achieve their potential. That's what we do with education, right? We strive to achieve our potentials. And you're not going to achieve any potential if you don't read, write, and calculate and have some sort of artistic expression. Those are all skills that you really just get through education and you know, are guided by qualified teachers and in a room with your peers.
So, Racheal, when you look at children, you know, the years between, like what Maja said, you know, they come from trauma, and you know, how education can be that central part that brings them back to being themselves, rebuilding their confidence. How do you see, like, not having that sort of education, you know, that gap, if they move, and how do you see it affecting the children without this, like, core education?
Okay, let's think about my day today. Yesterday, I have, like, you know, I have very strict routines every day, right? You know, I go to work, and then I do this, and I do this. And today, I had to wake up really early. I threw my kid off because she had to then have breakfast really early. Daddy's taking her to school today. I've thrown off her routine by just a little bit. And the rest of the day, she's going to need at least an hour at school to recover. I've texted her teacher to say, hey, you know, she might be a bit upset today because Mama's not bringing her in. And that was just a tiny, small little, like, it's not even a trauma. It was just your routine change today. These are refugees that have lost everything. They've lost family members. They haven't just lost education, but they've lost everything they've known. They are, I think, the statistics say that most of the time they end up in a country where the official language of the country is not even a language that they speak. So they can't even communicate with someone. They can't even, nobody really looks like them. Nobody really understands what they've gone through. You know, I think giving them, providing them the basic education, a safe place for you to go every day, where you see the same teacher, where you understand what's going on, somebody who is trained to help you process what's just gone through. You know, peers that are able to sort of draw you out and play, right? Because that's how kids develop and learn and process and cope. It's through play. And the idea of providing school is, we're going to give you a safe place. right? How do we as mothers sort of sit here and say, oh, but that's just not my problem. That's like the refugee children. That is the big problem right now, is that I'll be very honest, as a Malaysian, as a mom, I don't know nearly enough about refugee education. I don't know nearly enough because there's not enough people talking about it. I mean, I know of it from a very sort of surface level. And as I delve into this, getting ready for this, I was horrified and shocked by the data. Just sort of, why are we not doing anything? Why are we not saying anything? I'm sitting there, because I'm a child and family development specialist. I'm like, how do I teach Ella Grace? What am I going to say to her? And so this idea that you have to educate in order to empower. So let's build some schools for them.
Could I just wanted to draw out two things that Maja was talking about as well, about this idea of community, and Racheal, you talked about a safe space. So at the moment we're in the process of bringing a new school uniform. Our students wear Malaysian school uniforms. So if you saw them walking around, they would just look like Malaysian students. And we had some questions, why do you want a new school uniform? And it comes back to this idea of identity and community and safe space. And that's a lot of what we do. And growing up, I had to go to a school and wear a uniform, and I hated it. And of course, 3 days a year, there's the non-uniform day, and it's like, woo! And as a teenager, you spend months planning what you're going to wear. But I want to share a story. We had a student apply, and she had missed a few years of schooling. She's an older student. She's actually 19, and she wanted to apply and come to Ideas Academy. And she was talking to a mentor in the community, and this mentor was saying to them, you're 19, but you'll be back in with these younger students. You're going to have to wear a school uniform again. And her eyes just lit up at the thought that she was going to wear a school uniform, and she was going to have this very visible sign that she was identified and a part of this community. So that's the flip side of it. That's what we see when the students come in. It's a safe place. It's somewhere where they can look around and they know their classmates have experienced similar things to what they have, but it doesn't become their only identification in the class. They're in that class, and maybe they're the student who happens to be good at maths, or they're the student you always go to when you need the audiovisual equipment set up in the hall. They become that student rather than the refugee student. So we're providing them with this community and with this identity that's beyond what they're given.
And the dignity of it too.
Yes,
just to be able to gain back that I wear uniform. This idea, unfortunately, that a lot of people have is it's the poor children, so let's just give them our leftover clothes, or my food's expired, let's drop it off at the food bank. Are you kidding me? If you would not feed your kid that, then they deserve better, right? So let's give them the dignity to say, you are real people.
I think that's a really important point that you're putting out there, and I think that's where we sort of miss the target, because the refugee label really at times dehumanizes them. Either it creates an idea of that, they are of concern to the UN and they get immunity, so they're even above the law, or it's the other way around. It's it's these criminals, no good people, loitering on the street. They come to steal our work and stuff, right? If you just look at the figures in Malaysia, we're talking about 175,000 registered refugees and asylum seekers with UNHCR right now. In the larger group of documented and undocumented, predominantly labor migrants, which runs up in the millions, right? So we're below 0.5% of the total population of Malaysia to begin with. And out of that, you have 44,000 children, so individuals under 18 years. So that's 26% of that population. And then if you look at the school age going population, it's some 33,000, right? And that's roughly 20%, 19% of that population. So these are the sort of facts. It puts it into perspective, because when things are generalized and conflated, you end up talking about millions. And you don't.
The imagery of that is this.
It's overwhelming, and the public can't deal with that. The public needs to process these things and understand what are the factors. A labor migrant comes for a year, goes back. maybe not, doesn't matter. But you know, a refugee comes for specific reasons, not voluntarily, and is not able to go back immediately. Obviously, solutions needs to be looked at, and there's a perspective to pursue. But at the end of the day, you know, this is a very particular situation that requires a different approach.
I'm going to ask a question that just popped into my head because I checked, I didn't have that question. If, say, this is purely my curiosity, people. No, you know, if, say, we were to allow refugee children to be educated in the Malaysian public, you know, schools, how do you see that will affect the whole, you know, ambience of safe space? Because, you know, they're not Malaysian children. Of course, we want to give them as much access to education, and public schools are everywhere. But how do you think that will affect our children as well, you know? If the possibility of that happens. Yeah, I'm just curious.
I think the only way, you know, I think of this not just as a child and family development specialist, I think of this as a mother. The only way my child is going to learn how to be with other people, how to interact with other people, how to be able to be really good at interacting, reading other people, being able to ask for what she needs, being able to have boundaries, being able to exercise all those muscles that I want her to build: resilience, maturity, kindness, compassion, integrity. The only way she's going to be able to learn that is if she mixes with other people, people that don't look like her, people that don't have the same stories. So the idea of, like, I think there's this whole, like, misconception that if we let these bad kids into our school, that, like, yeah. But, like, a lot of times what happens is that that is a concern of parents everywhere, and that's why they don't allow them into local schools, because all these parents, I think at some point they said they were going to let them in, and the parents had this huge uproar of, like, oh, but, like, will it then decrease their education system? Will it then, like, if the teachers are so busy helping these other kids learn, then what's going to happen to our kids who are, like, you know, way more advanced? And the idea of, like, we've lost the human, like, compassion. We've lost the idea that these kids are not dumb. That, like, these kids, like, you know, all because they're refugees, does that mean that they're poor? Does not mean that they're poor or uneducated. Like, some of these parents are doctors and masters, and, like, I think I looked at the numbers and it was like, granting refugees access to education on par with locals would increase their GDP to over 6.5 billion each year by 2040, with annual tax contributions of over $250 million. Like, I mean, you want, you know, for these parents, they want numbers, and these are the numbers. So the numbers say yes. You want, in terms of our kids, well, I'm telling you, your kids are going to grow, and it takes you being respectful. It takes you saying, you know, these are other human beings. Look at international school. An international school is made out of lots of different people from lots of different countries, of different education levels, but somehow that's okay.
Kids
from
various different countries.
I was just going to jump in and say,
come from just one.
No.
Yes.
We, except to students from anywhere, and we are an international school. I've worked in international schools for almost 20 years in various countries around the world. And what we have at Ideas Academy is the same as what you'd see at any international school. You have that mix of nationalities, that mix of cultures. You have that common language, which is the school language, and in our case it's English, so that's something that brings the students together. Plus the identity of the school, which is connected in with the school mission statement and our vision and our idea that it's education for all. I think, Racheal, I am trying to think about what's the connection here with shifting that perspective. And if you want to shift someone's mindset, you have to get them to think, shift their perspective. And yes, there's always this immediate focus on the negative. And that's, as humans, that's what we do with our brains. We think about bad things more, we mull over the negative. But if we could just shift our mindset and think about, well, what are these positives that the students are bringing to the school? And if you look at our students at Ideas Academy, we have these incredible talents that they're bringing in. First off, they're resilient. They're here and they're in school, and they've had to fight huge hurdles to get there. Maya, you talked about the statistics. Well, out of that total number of children, 44,000 children, there's just over 800 high school age students in school.
That's really low.
Just over 800. So it's an incredibly low number. So our students at Ideas Academy, they're beating tremendous odds to be in a high school education. So already you've got, if you looked at that in relation to other students, these are the high achievers. These are the ones that want to go somewhere. They have that drive, they do their homework, they're volunteering, they're participating in any activity we offer. The students like, yeah, I'll give it a go, I'll try that. And I think how amazing for my daughter to be able to be in a classroom and have that as a role model. Yeah, yes, I think so. They're a huge asset, and they would be a huge asset in the public system.
Children are children, you know. Refugee international, they don't
Yeah,
see this. It's us. We do it, and we put the labels on them. And I think what we're missing in that sort of model of bringing refugees into the formal education is that this is the pathway to social cohesion and demystifying the whole idea of those people out there, you know. But I also recognize the concerns in the society, and nothing happens overnight. You know, that's just not the way things go, and it's probably not a very good, successful pathway to, you know, to follow. So there are ways of doing this gradually, where you bring the communities together, and you give them time to talk and to get to know each other, and the children to centrally to get together and to see each other in those local communities. Refugees live in the local communities. We don't have camps in Malaysia. You know, unfortunately, their stay here is not legal, and they don't have the right to work, which, you know, definitely underpins the whole idea of many of the things that we're talking around the table today. But in essence, there are ways of overcoming this, and it's really not that difficult. But it's important for the public to understand that social cohesion and the fear of the foreign is only broken down by asking questions and getting to know people, and let children, you know, grow together and learn together, because it's an investment in solutions. For the temporary period that they will be staying in Malaysia, they will be getting an education that will help them and their families cope, and that will help them make this decision to go home when time is right, when there's peace, and when they can be a part of rebuilding that country. And that's what we want, right? Because the lack of education of populations, the lack of stability in refugee families' lives makes that decision so much harder. And it certainly makes a new beginning back home double harder. You have no savings. You have, you know, you've not been able to have a productive life. You've lost all self-esteem, right? Your children are not educated, and now you're going to go back to Rakhine State and do what? You know, it's such a difficult, you know, it has such repercussions. So I really see education as a central investment in solutions.
Wow. Super important. I feel so educated. No, just to, you know, I mean, it really is a serious topic. And one of the things that, you know, I may have been a bit, well, uneducated and a bit naive about the whole refugee, you know, even the idea of like stateless and refugees. I mean, I think I just sort of clearly knew the difference maybe a couple of years ago, because I was like, oh, really? They're not the same thing? You know, honest, you know, but...
No, but I mean,
but there are people out there who probably don't know the difference.
Majority of people, exactly. And the idea, like, you know, you're not wrong at all, Eena. Like, I will be honest, I will totally admit, like, I don't know nearly enough. I only know because I had to prep for this interview, guys. But again, and that's why I'm here, right? I'm here to, like, I got you guys. They're like the smart people, and I got you. And so the idea was to then switch it around, right? I mean, turn it around so you can understand from a parent perspective. This is average Malaysian ma nene some days. But so the idea for a mom is, when I think about when I went away to school as a 16-year-old kid, Chinese girl, going to like Podunk, like Pensacola, Florida, like tiny little place, college, community college. I'm literally like one of the 2 Chinese people there. But it was an inclusive community because it was a community college. So it was a small town and people were welcoming. But I think about, if you want to turn it around and look at, like, let's humanize Let's humanize these kids. And think about when your kids go away to university and they're the only ones there and they stick out like a sore thumb. I mean, everybody looked at me like, oh, let's go be friends with the Chinese girl, because like, do you eat sweet and sour chicken? And so, but it was the idea of that was all they knew, so they wanted to create conversation. They wanted to understand where do you come from, and that was like the number one thing I thought about when I thought about like providing education for refugees, like how do we make it inclusive? And I just thought, what if that was your child? What if that was your child away in a university? And the thing is that is your child. Like we are all like, you know, the majority of Malaysians send their kids away for school.
And think of what you can prepare. What do you send them away with? You send them away with bank accounts and the right documents and new clothes and suitcases and promises of, you know, we're here to help, darling, if anything happens, and we're just a phone call away, and here's a calling card, and here's emergency funds, and well, what have they got?
Well, and if you turn it around, so my kid goes to if my kid goes to school with other refugees, and they've heard these stories before, so they understand resilience. They understand, oh my God, like I have that one friend who went to like, and they started anew, and so I can do this. And like, oh, it was so funny. She didn't know how this, like, I don't know, something Malaysia. She didn't know, she'd never seen kueh before, and it was funny. And so when I go to Pensacola, Florida, and I see like fried chicken steak, which is not chicken, for the first time, I can then recall the memory of like, okay, I'm not alone in this. I'm not the only one. Because when you're in that situation, you feel like you're the only one and everyone's staring at you. And so it's like, how do we build resilience? How do we build kindness? How do we build compassion? How do you integrate with society? You open up doors.
And how do we build peace? You know, at the end of the day, that's what we want, right? The situation in Asia right now is that we have one large refugee-producing country, which is Myanmar. If you look at the refugees in Malaysia, and if you were to take away Myanmar out of the statistics, there would be like 10,000 people left or something ridiculous like that, right? So you know, this is a neighborhood issue as well. So it's not just a question of looking at and you know, stabilizing the situation in Malaysia. By stabilizing the situation for refugees in Malaysia, you are also contributing to regional stability and to looking at a perspective of working towards solutions so that people one day can go back to Myanmar, because that's essentially what refugees want. They want to go home. They have left things back home that they need to get back to, and that's, you know, that's the bottom line.
You know, saying all this, so right now refugee children in Malaysia, they have to resort to private education, I assume. Right. Yes? Yes. So it's so they're really mostly learning centers. So these are more like private, you know, cost money.
Let me stop you there. So private, I'm a little bit iffy with the private part, because that's sorry, not private part, private education, because that sort of alludes to you know, a little bit of an elitist form of education, and that's not the case. So we have learning centers, and we call that an informal parallel system, where basically you have community-based organizations, you have NGOs, some supported by UNHCR, others not, providing some form of education. And a lot of that education falls short of what Ideas Academy is providing, which is, you know, certification and all the things you want in order to be able to progress in your educational life. A lot of the learning centers, unfortunately, cannot do that because there's no authority to administer that and to ensure that the kids can sit for exams and have access to sit to exams. So you have 130 learning centers around Malaysia, which covers, so primary education is the highest percentage in terms of coverage of refugee children, and that's 55%. So you got loads of kids in the age group 2 to 3, and in the youth group who are out of education on top of the you know, half the primary school age group. So that's, sorry to interrupt you, but that was, you know, just to qualify the learning centers.
I understand. What sort of education do the refugee children have access to? Because I think even we are not aware, because, you know, sometimes we say they don't have access, doesn't mean they're not going to schools totally. They do have learning centers.
That's right.
But like you said, learning centers are not fully equipped. They may not be able to get accreditation to move on. It's different, obviously, from Ideas Academy. So how do we assist? Like, how do we, I mean, you know, like what Racheal says, you know, coming from a Malaysian mom sort of perspective, how can I help another mom? Yeah. How do I do that? How do I help a refugee mom as a Malaysian mom to sort of give all children education in Malaysia, especially? Is there a suggestion? Do we? I mean, yeah. Okay, over to you, Dr. Sally.
So with these learning centres that Maja was talking about, a lot of them are, and us included, are heavily reliant on donations, volunteer work, anything that we can get to put together our schooling. So for us, we would very much welcome, we have student sponsorships programs. So if you wanted to do something, if you wanted to have that personal connection where you think I'm supporting a student to get their high school education, then you can contact us and we have a sponsor a student program. If you're particularly talented in something, we're always looking for volunteers for extracurricular activities or to support us. And we're also, of course, looking for always to improve our facilities and our resources. So again, donations, holding a funding campaign, a fundraiser that you might like to coordinate or develop that supports us would be amazing. What we have just shifted from is providing not just education for refugees, but we're now opening our doors to anyone who wants to come to Ideas Academy. So this model, which is a social enterprise model, so we've developed as a business that has this very much ethical and social justice focus. So we realise that what we're providing for refugees is an education that would be very beneficial to Malaysian students or non-registered non-Malaysians as well, particularly those who might be in a lower income bracket and who are looking for an international education, an IGCSE certification, preparation for university, but they can't afford the big international private schools, but they want that experience, then we're available. We're here and we're ready for enrolment.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. That's really an opportunity.
So it connects in with this education for all. It connects in with this idea that we're bringing our talented refugee students, our talented students, and connecting them in with the local community as well. So local students now have an opportunity to experience an Ideas Academy education.
Brilliant. So what is the idea of being inclusive? The idea of being inclusive means that if you just took a snapshot, you wouldn't be able to tell who the refugee children are, who the Malaysian children are. I mean, other than like skin color or whatever, but like on a glance, you wouldn't be able to tell, oh, they're from, that is the idea of inclusivity.
Yeah.
And so I think just from, again, from the mom perspective, from the what can I do with my child as an average Malaysian, talking to your child, bringing them into, like, there's all these festivals going on all the time where you can sit down and learn. There are books that the kids can get. There's a book that I really like called The Journey, and it's a beautiful book. It's a hard book, so it's not like a pretty book. It talks about like the hardships of the journey, but like sort of in an age-appropriate way, and it's great. And I read it with my toddler. I've read it with her since she was a toddler. We're in the middle of moving, guys, so I couldn't find it, but I brought a different book, and this book is called Come With Me. And so the idea was that after we had the journey, where do you go from there? Like, she's like, oh, but all these kids are they're lost, they have no home, like, what can we do, mama? Which is so great. If your kids are asking, what can we do, mama? This is a perfect opportunity to jump in. And so this book was then Come With Me. And so it's this little girl that sees, like, there's all this stuff going on in the world, and like, what do? I'm scared, because they're going to say, if that happens to that little girl, I'm that little girl.
There were the days, you know, we have, you know, in our Asian culture, our moms used to threaten us with things like that, you know. Yeah. It's like, you be naughty, I'll send you away to this country, you know, that sort of thing. I mean, it totally doesn't work nowadays, but we used to get, right? We always get threatened like that. So.
And so the idea behind the book is that then they go out into the community and they see what's going on and they interact with different people. They buy a meal. So. Dignity for Children. Yes. Dignity for Children. Every Christmas and Hari Raya, we buy a chicken and we feed a family. Picha Eats does this like beautiful catering. So when we have choice, we cater for them, and it brings different foods, and she gets to experience different foods. We've adopted a refugee family. It's a matter of you going out and saying, I'm willing to serve this community. I'm willing to go learn more. And if your kid is asking for that, we need to expose them to it. So like, how do you?
I mean, all the names you mentioned, like dignity and picha or pika, which one? Picha or pika? Picha or picha? So I think that's really one way refugee families can have sort of a purpose as well. Because if you're not allowed to have a job and things like that, I mean, things like this give them a purpose to have progress in their lives as well, rather than just feel like they're stagnant. Yeah.
And in a dignified way, like not in like a let's go parade all the refugee children for like a corporation like donation thing, but like this is in a like sort of like a way that is real and gives them dignity, and like you wouldn't want somebody to take your child to go parade them to get some money.
But I also think there's an opportunity for parents, for Malaysian parents, to ask questions. Ask questions to your MP. Ask questions to the Ministry of Education. Ask questions to other parts of government about, what is this all about, and what can we do as a society to fill some of these gaps? Because at the end of the day, this is not just about helping refugees. It is about Malaysia as well. It's about social cohesion in Malaysia. It's about investment, the investment that refugees also bring into Malaysia, So there's a lot of interest on both sides that can be met. It's not a one-way street.
Yeah, but someone has to really either spark the conversation or just keep the conversation going rather than
unpack it.
Rather than it just being like a hot topic that comes and goes.
Agreed.
It has constantly progressive conversation, because if it's like just a trendy thing, which happens nowadays, a topic comes, it becomes a trend, you talk about it, 3 months down the road you're not talking about it anymore.
I think that there's a huge opportunity with Malaysia going into its 12th development plan, which they've kicked off work on and will be working on for the next year. The development plan, there's a lot of collaboration with the World Bank, with the United Nations and other entities. And I think there's a recognition that the sustainable development goals really need to be up front. And the sustainable development goals are about leaving no one behind, which also considers refugees, right? And so if that momentum of preparing for that long-term plan and looking at the plans in Malaysia, if we start having an unpacking and discussion about the presence of a fairly small population at the end of the day in the country, then there's some low-hanging fruit there that can be plucked, that will be beneficial for the society in Malaysia, and that will create an enormous positive signal to the outside world and see Malaysia as the leader that they are. Because there's so many things that the government actually does help with when it comes to refugees. It's just that we can't get over that little hurdle that would make refugees help themselves in the society and contribute to society. That's where we are. We're sort of swinging in air.
Moms out there, parents out there. Maybe you can get into transformer mode like Maja, but I think just starting the conversation at home with your children is one way to create awareness, because your children's awareness as they grow up will continue. If it doesn't happen now, I hope it happens soon. But having said that, our children will grow up to be, the people who may make decisions, and they can make better decisions if we create that awareness at home today. So I've been told that I have 5 minutes left. Actually, maybe 10 minutes ago, I was told. So oh wait, I have a question. So maybe I'll just look at the question for a bit. But in this last 5 minutes, maybe we can start with Dr. Sally, if you have a few things to say before we end today.
I wanted to share this idea of all the different ways that you can become involved in the refugee community. Some of these things are very small. Maybe you can go, for example, there was an art show at Publica last weekend where our students were competing and actually won, so that was really exciting. So a very small act, simply taking your children there, see what they're doing, talk about what they're doing. You can volunteer and become involved in the school. If you'd like to do something that's where you get to have a lot of fun as well, then you could come to our European Gala, which is our big fundraising event, 5th of October at the JW Marriott. And that's in combination with the Lost Food Project, which is another fantastic organisation that helps support communities here in terms of redistributing food and providing resources to refugees. So that's a really huge event, and that's supported by the European Union, the embassies. There'll be lots of things going on that night, as well as performances from our students too.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, okay, so the question is, so what would be the practical steps to improve access to education for refugees in Malaysia? Is it simply a matter of letting all kids into our schools? I think we sort of answered that.
I think that would be a first step, but that would be take a huge step.
That's
I think smaller things could be the registration or of many of the learning centres. It's very difficult to get a learning centre licence. It's a tremendous amount of paperwork. It's a tremendous amount of hoops you've got to jump through. So for smaller community groups, they just don't necessarily have the capability to do that. But to be able to officially recognise the education that these learning centres are providing, to have support with organisations like Cambridge, which would maybe allow students to take exams at a discounted rate or provide help with curriculum development. All of these things are smaller steps that can take place slowly, and I think that's something that could be looked at very easily.
I would add to that in terms of smaller steps, because the registration is agreed to with the Ministry of Education, which is really positive. It's slowly sort of underway, and when we're not at the 130 learning centres mark yet. But one thing that would have a really tangible impact would be if the Ministry of Education would take responsibility for administering exams and letting the refugee students sit exams. If they would let the children from 3 to 5 into the childhood education programs that like Tabika that exists, if we were to have the Ministry of Education in charge, even if it's within the private administration of the section of ministry that looks at that, to begin with, where you actually would start setting some standards and saying like we control this education. They may not be in the public schools yet. That may be a gradual transition over a period of time, but for now we take control of the quality of the curriculum, so the national curriculum administered, and what's it called, and the examinations, making sure that whatever comes out of that learning center or hybrid or whatever it becomes, it is certified and you are able to progress. And then, the rest of us who are more sort of into the details of the consequences of being a refugee child and then coming to education, children who have lost a couple of years of education because of flight and not being able to access education, children with learning disadvantages for particular reasons linked to their flight and so on and so forth. That's where some of us can also come in and help around bridging those problems for refugee kids.
I would also say like practical in terms of like average Malaysian mom, average Malaysian family. Look at what your talents are. Look at what your skills are. Look at what you can contribute. And like all these places, I mean, even at the very least, money, right? So that they can hire people that they need or get resources that they need. Qualified teachers. Maybe, or if you are a lawyer, maybe you can provide legal help. If you are Eena, you can come in and write an article. If you are Racheal, you can come in and go play with some kids. You can talk to some parents. You can just hang out. I mean, it's that like your little bit matters. Like even if you feel like it's a little bit, and the idea, like as they're talking, right, I'm like, wow, lots of really big words. And so the idea is that if you don't understand, ask questions. We tell our kids all the time, there's no question too stupid, then you need to go role model that. If you don't understand, go ask some questions.
And there are people out there in Malaysian society who are doing these things. There are people who are really getting involved. We have a whole legal aid program where lawyers pro bono are coming out and giving legal advice to refugees, which is basically, all of this is two-way streets, right? These are your rights, these are your obligations. Because refugees are like all of us, right? We live in a society, we contribute, and we take some rights away. And that's exactly what, you know, the kind of support that people need when they are in that vacuum.
Can I just share so one of our most recent partnerships is with a Malaysian company, iTrain, and their focus is coding, and they've developed a whole coding curriculum. It runs from little ones, so 4 years old, right up to high school. They're implementing the high school segment with us, so all of our students will learn coding. And this is a skill that brings huge differences to their lives. So coding a skill, they can then suddenly work at a different income level compared to if they were working in washing up in the kitchens. It's transferable, they can take it anywhere, they can be anywhere and work for anyone. But it also teaches those skills that employers are looking for, and that's critical thinking, that's problem solving, that's collaboration, that's persistence. It doesn't matter what profession you go into, these skills are really highly valued. So to have that local partnership from iTrain, that's where, Maja, again this example where Malaysians are making a difference. And it's really important that we highlight those, and we're incredibly grateful for the partnership. And they've seen the value in putting that program and providing that education, because then they get these really well qualified interns and graduates and future employees that will come and work for them. So they see it as something that's equally beneficial for them as it is for our students.
Okay, so I have to end here before we not end. This usually happens anyway. There's so much more to talk about. I think this is, for me, a beginning of a conversation that I want to have more often. There's a lot for me to learn. I'll be dragging Racheal with me, poor thing. But, you know, thank you so much, Dr. Sally, for what you do as well at Ideas, and, you know, what you are extending the Ideas Academy, because you mentioned about including Malaysian children who are underprivileged to be able to get such, you know, amazing international education standards and things like that. Thank you, Racheal, for coming and joining me again, and you know, sharing, you know, like what we Malaysian mamas might not be thinking of or should be thinking of. And thank you, Maja, so much. You know, I think I'm probably going to have to meet Maja again to have a longer conversation and learn a lot more about the situation. I think I've been quite naive about it. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. If you want to find out more about the refugee situation in Malaysia, I think you can go to the UNHCR website. I think you can just Google that, and then you can learn more about Ideas Academy as well. I think I'm sure it's easy to find on Google.
Ideas Academy.
Yeah. Racheal, you can follow her on her IG. Her name is on her world IG, so you can go and find. I can't spell her. Wait, no, I can't spell her surname. Kwacz.
Yes.
Racheal Kwacz.
Yes. But
So-
Racheal spelled funny too.
Okay.
Racheal.
Okay, so find Racheal on her IG. Yes, so thank you so much for joining us. See you next month.